program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
All right, let's call the meeting to order tonight. Thank you for coming to the December 4th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. If you are planning to speak tonight, there are some yellow pieces of paper on that back counter. Please fill them out and then hand them to Ryan as you come to speak. And please begin speaking by stating your name and your address. If you do have a cell phone, please put it on mute or turn it off so we're not interrupted during the meeting. The first item on our agenda tonight is for public hearing for recommendation or rezoning from C3P to R3P on Bullis Farm Road.
This is the property located on Bullis Farm Road. There's actually R1 zoning above the site, up on the ridge line to the north and west. There is R3 zoning across the road, and then C3 zoning the rest of the area. An aerial photo. This is the Holiday Inn when it was under construction. Whipley has its new office building now under construction here. There's been an apartment built on these properties, and there's a whole bunch of new single-family homes up on the ridge line above the site. This is the general development plan for the property then, Bullis Farm Road. Shows the layout of 3 assisted living facilities on the property. These are 20-unit, 1-story structures. This is an 80-unit, 3-story structure with a shared driveway and parking. And there's rendering then of the 20-unit, there's 2 of them, 1-story structures on the property. Again, there's 2 20-unit, 1-story structures, 1 80-unit assisted living, 3-story structures. The request is for rezoning with a general development plan for those proposed uses. The request also includes special zoning permission for 3 CBRFs, which are over 16 residents, and to allow them to be within 2,500 feet of another CBRF. Those types of exceptions are considered by council as part of state law. There is a narrative provided by applicant explaining the request we placed within your packet. Phase 1 would be the 2 20-unit buildings. Phase 2 would be a future development of the 80-unit 3-story building. In terms of the zoning, the comprehensive plan land use map identifies the site being appropriate for commercial development. The comprehensive plan text then states that in areas designated for commercial development, the city will consider residential zoning based on a set of criteria which we placed in your report. We would note the property across the street has already been rezoned from C3 to R3P for the apartments. We would note the homes to the north and west of the site are separated from this project by significant grade change and a wooded hillside. We would note the development shows 6.91 acres of the site will remain in wooded conservancy, which we shaded on the development plan. We expect traffic impacts from the project would be limited since the people living at these facilities are not expected to drive. And in terms of surface water drainage, we'd review that with final site plans. We do believe the proposed downzoning of the property is consistent with the provisions of the comprehensive plan and would be compatible at this location. In terms of the community-based residential facilities, we placed in your report the provisions of city code for you to review. Under Wisconsin statutes, CBRFs need to obtain special zoning permission if there's more than 16 residents and if they are within 2,500 feet of an existing CBRF. This proposal has 3 CBRFs, all will be over 16 residents. The applicant notes that this proposal has a total of 120 units with 144 residents, and the CBRFs are also then within 2,500 feet of each other. Again, we would note the project will be required to provide adequate utilities, access, parking, drainage, and other site improvements, since final site plans for this project will need to be reviewed by the Plan Commission. We do not expect the project will have significant traffic congestion within the area since these folks do not drive, And this zoning proposed for the site R3 is consistent and appropriate for this type of use. We did attach the city engineer's report, and it is within your packet. If you find compliance with the provisions we noted in the report, we would recommend that you approve this rezoning and special zoning permission with conditions, those being that the Plan Commission will review final site plans for the project, and that the special zoning permission is allowed for only the 3 CBRFs as described in the narratives. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Daryl? Commissioner Mitchell?
Thank you. Daryl, on in the last page of the letter from Azura, it'd be page 13 on the hard copy. The summary of requests, zoning change from B4 to RM1 and conditional use permit, what's that about?
I do not know. My guess is that comes from some other community they were applying for. It is not applicable to our community.
Okay, then I have a second question about their,
Okay.
and that is on page 11. Under zoning use, they proceed to tell us what sort of uses could be allowed in our 3P area. Is there any idea that they might decide to use these facilities for some other reason? I mean, why are they telling us that?
My guess, you can ask the applicant, is they're trying to compare the C3 zoning on this property and what can occur versus the down zoning to an R3 and what can occur under the city's planned development ordinance, which is what we are reviewing. The development is what you see on the screen or something smaller. If they choose to do something different than that, they're going back to public hearing. So.
Are there any other questions for Daryl? I have one if no one else does. The 2 parcels of land that are directly to the east of this, those are still zoned commercial, correct? The ones that would...
These here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
These were the ones that were rezoned and the apartments approved for those. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Hello, my name is Matt Lyons with the Azura Living. I don't know if you need an address or anything for the record.
Yeah, we need a name and address.
Yeah, so our company address is 1233 North Mayfair Drive, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So if I can, I have prepared, do I have a couple minutes?
Yep,
or?
go ahead.
Okay. So I guess first, and bear with me, I'm new to this technology, I'll try and get it on there. Just wanted to give a little bit of update on who Azura is and what we're doing. We actually have an existing 20-bed CBRF that we operate within Eau Claire here. We've got 12 other communities throughout the state of Wisconsin. We were founded by Josh McClellan, who grew up in the senior housing industry and has been operating senior housing communities for the last 20-plus years. Azura was founded in 2006. And we took over an existing portfolio of memory care communities throughout the state and have turned those around. And then as part of our turnaround, we've been developing new communities in new areas and then looking to improve our existing buildings in our existing communities. And so that's where we are here is we have a 20-bed community just on the other side of Oakwood Mall that we would be transitioning from there to this new development. So it's a net increase of 20 total beds for the community for the first phase. The mission at Azura is to transform the culture of memory care. We really look at things holistically and try and do things the right way, not necessarily the way that the industry does things. So we operate under the household model, which is we try and provide a residential home environment for our residents in a way using technology and kind of cutting edge architectural design so that we can provide the care within that setting safely. So when you see our buildings, which this was a rendering that was shown before, the scale of these look like residential houses. We put faux garages on the front. One of the garage doors on each side is generally operable for receiving, but instead of doing loading docks and that sort of thing, we do a garage door just like you load your groceries at home. We have an operable residential front door that gives a perception of a home, which is what we're trying to provide for our residents. They can't live at their homes anymore, but there's no reason they shouldn't live in a home. So that's kind of what we're all about, and what we're trying to do here is take something that was our previous building was built in the mid-90s as a cutting edge building for Alzheimer's and dementia care at that time, and what we're building now is on the cutting edge of what the research and building standards are currently. I'm not sure what happened to my chart there. So as far as the demographics go, this is an interesting chart that is from NIC, which is the National, sorry, I'm spacing on the name. It's a national organization that provides data for senior housing. And these demographics are really interesting. The red boxes in the middle, well, all of the boxes are live births by year. So the red box with the arrow here is pointing to 1935, which is the year that our current average resident age was born. So our average resident age is 82 years. So those folks were born in 1982. So as you can see, simply by the number of live births over the next 20 years, there's going to be a significant increase in flat population for folks of that 82 age, and generally 13% of the population over the age of 65 is afflicted with some sort of Alzheimer's or dementia. So when you start looking at the numbers, this chart is concerning, and that's the reason that we're looking at doing this now, and then also while we're looking at this future phase 2 development and wanting to reserve the right to build something at some point in the future when the demands, especially when the baby boomers start hitting that 82 age and we really start seeing that demand, that we would have the ability to submit a site plan and move forward without having to change the zoning at that point in time. The next thing I have here, this is some images of some recent developments that we've done. The three pictures on the right-hand side here is a project that we did in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, which is a bedroom community outside of Milwaukee. You can see the residential nature of the building. We do large outdoor courtyards where the residents can come and go freely. It's a secured courtyard, so we have that ability, and then very residential-looking interior spaces. The next project is a project that we actually just opened this year in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Milwaukee as well, using the exact footprint and prototype that we're proposing here. You can see the picture of the actual constructed building. The rear of the building inside the L is a nice courtyard, backyard for our residents, and then you can see here an image of the residential kitchen and the dining area within our homes. This is an aerial image of the proposed project. I just wanted to note, I think it was commented that there's a large amount of conservancy between us and the residential homes over on Oakwood Hills. There's actually, from the center of our site here up to where the residential homes are, there's actually a 75-foot grade change. And to your question previously, the reason that we did show the uses was just to show that, this is what the downsizing or the down zoning would provide for. Our intent is definitely to do senior housing here. But the way that we've planned our site is that our lowest density, our lowest scale is the closest to the residential homes. So we'll have our single-story units, our memory care units that have the courtyards facing the wooded conservancy would be first, and then if we were to do a larger development or an RCAC on the remaining portion, which would be up to 3 stories, that would kind of increase in intensity as you get closer to the commercial area, which we feel makes a nice transition from the residential neighborhood down to the commercial neighborhood. And I think this was this is a larger version of the page that you were referring to previously. Again, our intent is to do senior housing here and stick with that. And then I've noted in this chart as well, just some of the dimensional standards and where our proposed project would fall out versus what the requirements would be after the fact, which were all substantially inside of those requirements. And I think it's been explained, but this is what we are planning to do and what we'd be submitting site plan for in the very near future. We would plan to break ground on this project in the spring or early summer once we get through all of the approval process, and then we're just wanting to reserve the right through zoning for the phase 2, but don't have a current plan for what that site would be in the future, other than knowing that it would be senior housing. And then this is just a couple of renderings of what our phase 1 development would be. Again, very similar to our previous project, and then the residential living areas within our homes. And then the last page I have here is just the proposed development plan.
Are there any questions for the applicant? I have one, if no one else does. Where is the main entrance to each one of those buildings?
So the front doors, you can see it on this one. So there's a front door here. Okay. And then the front door, where it would be on a house, just to the left of the garage is here. Okay. And so there's just a sidewalk from the driveway in front of the garage over to the front door, which is not shown on here, but they relate to this inset on both of the houses.
So there's secured and unsecured areas within there to keep the residents from wandering?
The entire house is secured and the courtyard is secured, and then our residents would remain in the house and the courtyard except for supervised visits and things outside of the house.
Okay, very good. Any questions for the applicant? I don't see any.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion. Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. I'll move approval with staff and engineering recommendations.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on our agenda is a public hearing for approval on conditional use permit for a ground sign at 4070 Commonwealth Avenue.
Menards Inc. is requesting a conditional use permit for this ground sign, which incorporates BAM, TJ Maxx, Ashley's, and TSW. As you can note on this proposal, they're adding one more future tenant below DSW. The current strip center already has most of all these tenants, and they also are getting a Home Goods coming in the future. This other tenant would also potentially go on this existing pole sign. The existing pole sign is 200 square feet, is 40 feet in overall height. They're proposing to add a 3.6 by 16 feet, which would be 56 additional square feet, for a total of 256 square feet. The current sign is noted right here. It is within the landscape island. It's approximately 20 feet off the setback, and it services this entire strip center We would note that Best Buy does have existing sign, which is over here. They're on a different parcel, though. BAM is also on a different parcel, however, they have an easement beyond this existing sign. Within your staff report is the conditions that are reviewed under a conditional use for a sign that's greater than 200 square feet. We would note that the shopping center is approximately 11 acres in size and has approximately 400 feet along Commonwealth Avenue. And again, the shopping center is pretty large. It's approximately 130,000 square feet. And we would also note that there's only one other additional sign for Best Buy. Staff would recommend approval of the request, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions? I don't see any. Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Good evening. My name is Nick Brenner. I'm here on behalf of Menards. Address is 5101 Menard Drive here in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I just want to note that this is a pretty big thing for us. I wish I could tell you guys how many national tenants we've had interest in this center, had interest in coming to Eau Claire, and have turned away because we could not give them a sign on one of the two panels, or on a panel on one of the two signs. It's a huge thing for commercial users to have this so people can see it and know where they are. And, all the negotiations we had, or a lot of them, have kind of turned sideways when we told them we can't get them a sign. So by having this flexibility in the future, we have a number of leases that are coming to the end of their terms, their expirations. And the goal obviously is to refill those as fast as we can. It helps the shopping center, it helps the owners, and it helps the city of Eau Claire bring in more sales tax. So if we have this panel, it provides so much flexibility in the future to help release these spaces when they become available. You can look at the home goods space, Hancock Fabrics. We had a sign panel available for them, and it took over a year to get them settled. So it takes a long time. The sign panels are a very important part in a lot of these tenants negotiations. This would be a huge thing for the future use of the shopping center.
Are there any questions for the applicant? I have one.
Yep.
So not every tenant within the shopping center has a panel there. Is it based on the amount of square footage that the store has, whether or not they're offered an option with that, or?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. Most of the big anchor tenants, they're the bigger ones, the Home Goods, the TJ Maxx, the Ashleys. Though most of them won't even consider a spot on this type of panel because of the anchor. They're bigger, they need something. So yes, a lot of it goes to the size of the tenant. Usually the bigger tenants have a little bit more power and want to be known. They want to be the ones that draw the customers to the shopping center. When you get to your smaller ones, a lot of times, the big guys already took the sign panel, so I'm sorry, there's nothing left. You can either come or you can stay. It's your choice. And, that's what we're trying to help out is give some of those smaller tenants an option to have a sign up there if that's a make or break deal for them.
Okay, one more follow-up question. Do they prefer a sign that's up as opposed to one that's like a monument sign on the ground?
Again, it depends on the site. This site especially, they like pylons because this one especially you can see from 53. That is a big thing. They want it up high so you can see it when you're driving by. That applies to a lot of different sites. It all depends on traffic. If your main road your site's right on a main road, you can see a taller one farther off, but monument signs work too as you get closer. So.
Okay, thank you. Just general education. Any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move we grant the conditional use.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next item on the agenda, if I can find the agenda, there it is. For recommendation of final plat for Creek Ridge Phase 2.
This is the original preliminary plat for what was at that time called Sherman Estates off of Cameron, Vine, I-94. And we're at about the 5th or 6th phase now into the project. And that's this area up here that we're looking at this time. And since then, it's now been renamed Creek Ridge. So this is the second phase of the Creek Ridge project, which is provided to you now as a final plat. It is 16 lots for single-family development, where the preliminary plat actually showed 18 lots for this area. These lots all meet the design and dimensional standards of an R1 districts. You can see they've noted areas in excess of 20% slope, legally defined them and labeled them non-buildable on the final plat. They have provided the utility easement requests along the public streets. The plat does extend Creek Ridge Drive to a corner, which then becomes Tucker Trail. You will note that when you compare this to the preliminary plat, they do not propose to extend Creek Ridge through to the adjoining property. Instead, they are proposing to take Tate Avenue and extend that through to the adjoining property. And we do believe that change is appropriate in terms of providing future access for future development to the west. The development agreement for street and utility extensions will be a separate item on council agenda for this final plat, and we are recommending approval.
Are there any questions for Daryl? I don't see any, thank you. Is the applicant here?
Kent Peterson, 7325 Ridgewood Drive, Eau Claire. I just came to observe. So, but certainly if anyone has a question, I'd be glad to answer it.
Does anyone have any questions for Kent? I don't see any.
Okay, thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion for approval of the Phase 3. 2 for the final plat. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda, final condominium plat for 222 Water Street Condominium. To provide an amendment.
This is the addendum to the 222 Water Street condominium. This is water and third. The actual footprint of the building sits right here. Parking to the rear, parking, an alley, and then there's another parking lot across the alley. The original condominium plat divided this building into 2 units. The residential aspects of this has been sold off to another entity. And what this addendum does now is take primarily the main level and splits it into 5 additional commercial units for sale into separate properties. The parking area here and to the rear are associated then with units 1, 3, 4, and 5. Unit 2 is the residential aspects. The parking lot on this side then is associated with unit 6. The parking lot across the alley is a common element, so it can be used by anybody, including the residential aspects of the building. The addendum to the condominium plat does not change any of the uses of the building. It simply allows them to be sold off separately, and they still do provide their parking requirement. The revised condominium declarations have been are being reviewed by the city attorney's office. We are recommending approval, subject to city attorney's review of those revisions. Are there any questions?
This still includes the parking requirement that Cross Water Street is providing?
Yes, the original conditional use permits approved by Planning Commission for the residential aspects are tied to the parking lot across the street and to the east across Second Avenue, yes.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Daryl? I don't see any. Is the applicant here?
Hello, Joe Miller, 4643 Old Wells Road. I too came just to observe, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you guys have any about it.
Any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. It looks like you're ready to get these sold, huh?
Thank you.
Very good. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion.
I move for approval.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. For recommendation, to declare vacant land as excess land, 2300 First Street.
Property located at 2300 First Street is located in the Cannery District. We are looking at a transfer of ownership from the City of Eau Claire to the RDA. This would allow the RDA to, the ability to convey the property to a future developer at a later date. There's nobody in particular that we know of that's interested at this time, but it allows them to market it and look for a developer for the property. The highest and best use for the property, we're looking at a potential 1 to 2 family district or a mixed residential district, which is similar to what's in that area at this time. The property we're looking at is here. These ones are mixed residential. There's light industrial on this side. We're looking at transferring the ownership for $1 for the fee. And at this time, there's no impact on the market value or the tax value, given that they're both tax exempt. No, that is all I have. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. So the city would sell it to the RDA for $1.
Correct.
And then when the RDA sells it, do they pay the $1 back, or how does that work? Where does the money go when the RDA sells it?
To the RDA?
To the RDA?
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay. I just wondered.
Yeah.
Any other questions? There aren't any improvements on the property at this time,
No.
right? It's just vacant land?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. I don't see any questions.
Okay.
All right, so this is a public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and I'd be looking for a motion. Commissioner
I'll move
Mitchell.
approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Discussion and direction, Town of Washington Comprehensive Plan Update.
I'll take that. That's not bad. We provided you a copy of the draft Town of Washington Comprehensive Plan Update, and we have been requested by the town to provide comments on the update. And it's been the past practice of the city to provide those comments through the Plan Commission. And past Plan Commissions have based their review on the terms of the intergovernmental agreement we have with the towns, which is included in their comprehensive plan as Chapter 6 within that attachment. We have prepared a draft letter for Plan Commission to consider as a way of providing those comments, and I'd like to go over them and answer questions. And I understand that my page numbering may not have matched up with the document you got. I was basing it on a hard copy, and you guys got electronics. I'm not sure what happened, but There's an intergovernmental cooperation section of the town's plan on page 2-13, and it has two introductory paragraphs that the city actually perceives opposite of the town's perspective. The town in that introductory says we're encouraging sprawl with our agreement within our sewer service boundary. We actually believe that 10-acre density provision within the intergovernmental agreement within the sewer service area slowed additional sprawl and will actually allow that area to better urbanize. We do agree with objective 4 that's in that section, and we will continue to improve our communication and transparency in terms of our planning efforts, and that's what that objective talks about. And we also agree with policies 1 and 2 in that section, where they basically are saying we should be given opportunities to comment on each other's plans. So that's what I noted in the letter. But I did want to point out that one statement in there is kind of opposite of how we view it. I think it's important to do that because you think back to where their 2009 and 2000 plans were. There was a whole bunch of that type of statements in their planning documents, and now it's mostly gone. We tend to agree with each other in terms of how we perceive planning for each other. So that's important to note that. On pages 3-5 and 3-6 under the rural transition section of the town plan, they make a statement that the town shall limit residential subdivision development until 75% of the lots within all existing improved residential subdivisions are developed and occupied. And this comes out of the provisions of our agreement. But then at the end of that statement, they say improved lots are those that are ready to be built on, served by public road, and electrical services are in place. I then put in your letter to them the actual language from the intergovernmental agreement. And I state our interpretation of the intergovernmental agreement is a 75% standard applies to improved lots which are developed and occupied, meaning the dwelling unit is built and being lived on. The last sentence in the town's plan has added to this provision and should be eliminated so as not to create any confusion. Because someday in the future, we're going to be having a discussion with the towns as to when these areas are 75% developed and occupied, and there will be a desire for them to change the plan. And I'm sure it'll be an interesting discussion as to, well, is it 75% developed and occupied? And I don't think they should be adding language that would confuse that discussion into their comprehensive plan. The town's plan has now consolidated its policies for rural residential with the previous rural residential cluster, and then states policies that encourage cluster development. That's actually consistent with the intergovernmental agreement. That's a good change that they made that. The town's plan stated on page 6, starting on page 6.1, appears to be consistent with the intergovernmental agreement. In other words, they're actually quoting in the town's plan the intergovernmental agreement. There's a note on page 6-4 defining potentially developable land, and it has the 12% slope standard. That's actually the old standard. They asked us to amend that standard to a 20% slope standard, so we're noting you may want to correct that. And then the final comments then have to do with their land use map, which is on the screen. And I'll try to zoom in here. Oh, wow, I got it right. It's down on the 93 corridor where we're mainly talking. So they have now added this park site and the commercial area with the Trillium plat, which city reviewed about a year ago, and this is correct. So we want to note to them that's correct. They then have added then commercial areas outside the sewer service boundary. The sewer service boundary is County II, which is right there. So south of that, they've added a commercial area here. They've actually deleted a commercial area here, which is the former greenhouse facility, and that is now residential. And we approved a plat for, I think, 7 lots on that. And they also deleted a commercial area here. So actually, they deleted 2 commercial areas and added this commercial area outside the sewer service boundary. And we do put then in your letter to them the language that our agreement has, and we note they have included that in their planning document. We thank them for doing that. And then the final, they did add commercial area within the sewer service boundary, again, double I. North of that, they added this commercial area. And we note again, the language in the intergovernmental agreement says that if you're going to add commercial area by zoning it, not by the planning, but by zoning it, the city has to agree to that. So we again thank them for noting that they placed that provision in their plan. And then we state, as we have previously discussed, because I've actually met with them and talked about this, we are concerned with the size and topographical issues for that commercial area proposed on the south end of Friedrich Road. This will require city approval under the terms of the intergovernmental agreement, and we would encourage the town to reconsider that commercial designation. Doesn't mean we're not saying you can't designate it, but if you're going to zone it someday, you're going to have to come in and ask the city, and that's actually a city council decision as to whether or not they're going to accept it. If you're familiar with the property, it's got a big hill on it. It may make sense to take the property along 93 and have a smaller area commercially designated, but the big hill and everything to the east, in my mind, should be left as a residential designation. And I've had that discussion with them in terms of what we mean. So that's a summary of the letter I drafted for you to send to them, and I'd certainly answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Peterson.
Wasn't that area at the end of Friedrich Road, wasn't that proposed residential development at one time? I think it was the Menominee.
Yeah, there's other, I'll even zoom in more now.
I think Cedar Core had a plat in there for residential development at one time.
I've not seen for this property, which is the property we're talking about, a plat for that property. I've seen plats for some of the smaller, and really they're certified survey maps to the south of that. And then we did have the larger Trillium Estates project, which is illustrated right here.
Yeah, this was the one with the hill going up the hill, and there was a road on the south side of it. I'm pretty sure Cedar Core did it, but beside the point, they're looking at commercial then.
They've designated it in the plan. And just so you know, our discussions, which were preliminary with the town, was they acknowledged that, yeah, that's probably too large of a designation, and they said they were going to look at it more.
Is there any slope problems in there? Are they over 20% with some of that? Or?
I don't know. Guessing, yes, there probably is,
okay,
but I don't know.
So that could prohibit anything back away from 93 then, too?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Quinkhammer.
Thank you.
You were hiding your blue button.
Regarding that provision that's in here that you mentioned in your letter, our letter, 70% developed and occupied issue.
Mm-hmm.
For my edification, if nothing else, what is the ramifications of the occupied component of that as opposed to not occupied?
Not occupied?
Yeah.
Again, what I was trying to accomplish in making that statement in your letter is that we shouldn't be adding language to that in a town comprehensive plan, because it's someday in the future, a group of people are going to sit down and determine, well, what does occupied mean? In my mind, occupied means the dwelling units are occupied. From the perspective that if 75% of the homes out there are built and occupied, then it's time to start looking at expanding these rural residential areas so that they can have more homes in the town of Washington. But until then, under the terms of our agreement, there's no need to be doing that. If they're not occupied, in other words, they're a vacant home, there's plenty of homes out there still for folks to live in, and we shouldn't need to be building more homes, is the point of the way I read that provision in the agreement.
I see.
And at this time, we don't have to determine that. Some future group's going to have to determine that. But I don't think we should be adding more language in a document that might just confuse that discussion at a future date.
Okay. So we're saving future plan commissions.
An argument as to terminology,
okay.
Yes.
Thank you. It isn't, okay. This issue doesn't have anything to do with feedback to the town of Washington, but on page 4.7, which is on page 96 of the electronic version, there's a chapter in here that says inconsistencies with the City of Altoona Comprehensive Plan. Let's see, let's find that paragraph. Okay, in the last paragraph, in the third sentence, in general, these policies consistent of limiting residential development. Oh, okay. To a minimum lot size of 10. However, unlike the City of Eau Claire, Altoona does not require annexation and connection to the city sewer and water lines for commercial or industrial development. My thought would be, wouldn't it be in our interest to have consistency with the City of Altoona in terms of annexation for those kind of situations?
I believe we do. I'm surprised of that statement. I did not know that Altoona was extending sewer and water for commercial and industrial. But I didn't note that, if that is an error, because I'm not Altoona's planner, so
Yeah.
I can tell them, you may want to contact Altoona to see if that's correct, that statement, but
Okay.
I don't think it is. I think they require annexation in order to connect to sewer or even commercial industrial projects.
Well, I'm totally ignorant, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it would seem to me that as we move forward as two different cities, that we would want that consistent with one another.
Yeah, and they have the same 10-acre requirement within the sewer service boundary. The sewer service boundary is consistent with ours. We actually are meeting with them now in terms of a future jurisdictional boundary, which was requested as part of the comp plan. We've had some meetings on that, and that's going slow, but at least we're having the meetings and discussions. So we're building in that type of consistency between the two jurisdictions.
Okay.
Questions for Daryl? I don't see any. What do you require from us on this? Do you
I think
need a motion?
to say the letter's good to send would be
I move that we send the letter as is.
We have a motion, I believe. We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next, code compliance items. We're good. That van has not been on that yard since they were notified that they couldn't put it there anymore.
Okay.
So we're good there. Any future agenda items? Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody of the volunteer appreciation breakfast on January 10th at 7:30 in the morning at Hobbs. You too, Terry, you know who you are. And so I hope you'll all come, because we have a good crowd and we have a good time and good food.
And
Yes. Yes, Daryl.
And for those who hadn't heard, we are canceling your December 18th meeting.
Good.
And then your next meeting on January 2nd, just to remind you, that's a Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be a little bit bigger agenda because of, we canceled the meeting. Okay.
Very good. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.